dimensions of this webinar. Dear participants, we have eminent personality with us today morning. Professor Philip Bell from Australian Institute of Water Science. He is the chairman and CEO of AIWS India. Sir, we are honored to have you as a speaker for this webinar and eagerly waiting to hear your words on environmental skill education, a new paradigm. We are honored to have you, sir, as our speaker for this international webinar. I request you to start your session. Over to Professor Philip.
Thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity, everybody, to participate in this important forum. And I will go straight into it. Thank you to everybody for the introductions. That was very graceful. At the moment, I will now just share my slide, and then we can get right into it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I presume you can see the slide now, the first one.
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so I'll start here. This is environmental skills education in a new paradigm. Now, basically, I've developed this particular talk on specifically on skills education, so that in the past, what's happening is we focusing a lot on education that's centered around academics, but very little education is actually done specifically for skills. So this is what this focus is going to look at. Now, currently, to give you some background, currently education design focuses on academics and ignores skills training. In fact, the education hierarchy undervalues skills education, particularly in some developed countries, and certainly the experience that I have found in India, and that is skills, proper skills are not valued as much as higher education. And this is certainly not the case in developed nations like Australia, where there's very much equal standing with education and also with skills. So skills training is highly valued in this country. Now, what we've discovered over the years that I have been working in India is that there's a lack of practical skills amongst graduates. So people are graduating from universities and institutes with bachelor's degrees in engineering and science. And although they have a great amount of knowledge and the courses are excellent courses, they lack some basic skills training. In other words, for instance, in the area of science, being able to even just simple things like collect background data. Now, practical skills are passed down through direct employment or passed through generations. And this is one of the issues that's happening in India, and hopefully Education 4.0 can address some of these. And that is typically what happens is skills are passed down by an employee or a manager who happens to have the skills at that time. They may not necessarily have had any formal skills training themselves. So what they do then is pass down errors and misunderstandings, which are passed down from management or some employee to other employees. And the reason for that is because tradition is the way that information is passed down rather than education. So the point of this talk is to emphasize the need for skills education. In other words, not relying on simply tradition. Which button do you press? How do you do this? How do you do that? Which in fact may be technically incorrect. It also means that India is able to take advantage of new technologies. So new technologies will mean that specialized skills training will be required for these new technologies. and simply passing down information from one generation to another, from one management to employee, will not work in the future. So India is relatively a young nation. So as around 28 million youth population being added every year. This is a huge. This is the population, more than the population of Australia is added to simply the youth population in India every year. More than 50% of its population is below the age of 25, and more than 65% are aged below 35. So this is an extremely young nation. And this year in 2020, the average age of an Indian is now only 29 years old. And when you compare that, for instance, to 37 years old in China and 48 in Japan, this is a significant advantage. First of all, because very quickly, most of the Western nations and certainly some of the other nations like China and Japan will have a vastly aging population. This means that production will be less. And this places India in a position to take advantage of the situation where such a young population is able to produce such massive production. So what do we do with this huge dividend? Well, the first thing we need to do, as the President Parab Mujaki said in a recently organized C2 event in Kolkata, please excuse me for mispronouncing his name. We often boast about India's demographic dividend, but the question that arises is what will we do with this if we cannot skill them? If we cannot educate them and cannot enhance their employability. So what the president is saying is simply this. There is no point having this advantage if we don't take advantage of it. To add to that, about 90% of employment opportunities requires vocational skills, and that's only going to get more. In other words, as new technologies are developed, more technical skills are required. We're moving from a situation of very menial skills to highly technical skills. And only 20% of Indian graduates at this stage are achieving employment. Now, I'm not sure that I've sourced that number quite carefully. However, even if it's slightly wrong, it certainly is in the right ballpark. So if only 20% of Indian graduates are achieving employment, we need to ask ourselves why. And the rest are unemployable due to the lack of practical skills. And this is the why. We need to raise the level of practical skills. It's no point having a situation of highly qualified graduates who don't have the practical skills to actually join the workforce. So due to globalization, the demand for skilled and multi-skilled workers has increased. Therefore, in the context of developing countries such as India, there's a critical need for quality skills development. India will be the envy of the world. India has the potential to be the envy of the world. And all that's needed at this stage is to consider that to better education for more of the population, and certainly in the skills area that's needed. So not just needed in India, but needed all over the world. There is absolutely no doubt that as populations age throughout the world, they will be looking to India to increase their productivity in other countries. Okay. In the present context of globalization, the demand for skilled and multi-skilled workers has increased. This is a point that I need to reiterate. Therefore, there's a critical need for quality skill and development training. not just to service the industry in India, but also as a feeder for other countries. So where Indians will be able to travel to other countries, work and live, and perhaps be able to share information as well. So let's have a look at the particular employability skills that we need to consider now. So communication skills, verbal and written. These are not specific skills that are given in degree courses or in diploma courses. These are specific skills that we need to consider putting in those courses or having specific skills courses that address these issues. Communication skills, both verbal and written. Attitudes towards work, lifelong learning, teamwork, problem solving, self-motivation, adaptability, stress management, creativity, and technology and IT skills. These are extremely important facets of employability skills. So what opportunities are available if we do go down the road of including skills training? Well, there's education. Education is a massive field that includes not just education on the Indian subcontinent, but education around the world. In other words, India has the potential to be educators around the world. Technology, again, India has the ability to create technology, but that's never going to happen without skills training. So, high-level knowledge needs to be backed up by skills training in order to take advantage of technology and to produce new technology. Again, manufacturing is a changing paradigm, which means that in order for India to take advantage of new technologies, new shifts in energy, all of those sort of things, again, skills. That same thing applies to science and health and pharmaceuticals. But I want to focus on the environment, because none of the other things are going to matter without the environment. So what's happening now? We actually have an environmental crisis in India. Whether we like it or not, it's a fact that we have to face. For instance, just a few short years ago, we were looking at a severe drought in Maharashtra, and in fact throughout India. So India has a severe shortage of water. There are cities in India where water has to be shared only on a few hours per day. This is unnecessary. And because the surface water that's available in India is sufficient. However, the amount of surface water that's useful in India is not sufficient. And that's the difference. Droughts in 10 states estimated to impact the economy by 650,000 crore. Agriculture, animals, grains, seeds, manufacturing, rural water needs, urban water needs, famine and starvation as a possibility, massive economic loss with very little chance of recovery in the short term. These are the impacts of drought. These are the impacts of not having sufficient skills to be able to mitigate against natural disasters. And in fact, because of climate change, this is an inevitability. We are no longer in a situation where we might be able to mitigate against climate change. Climate change is there. Now we need two focuses. One is to mitigate against climate change, and secondly, adaptation. There needs to be a focus on adaptation because that is inevitable. So what are the crises and where are these areas? Waterways and rivers. We've got solid waste is a major problem. Wastewater treatment that leads to waterways and rivers problems. Air pollution, we've got e-waste, and we've got biomedical waste. All of these issues need to be dealt with in terms of skills trainings, particular skills training. No longer can we just rely on menial labor to simply dump waste in any convenient location. First of all, dumping waste near urban centres is no longer viable. Land is scarce and land is needed, especially near large urban centres. So to use that valuable land simply to dump waste is not sustainable. This is an example of rivers and waterways. That comes from untreated water. This is air pollution in Delhi in 2019. This is unnecessary. Solid waste dumps prevail close to major urban areas, create health hazards and fire hazards. The Yamuna, the main source of water for Delhi, is one of the most polluted rivers in the country. 19 drains in the capital flow into the river, contributing to 96% to the total pollutants in the Yamuna. Just 5% of the sewage that is discharged in the river is treated, posing a serious health problem. We should ask ourselves, how is it that India has such amazing technology in wastewater and water treatment that still discharge of effluent from CETPs would end up in the Yamuna and other major rivers in India? And the reason for that is that we've discovered is simply that skills training in the area of wastewater treatment. So in other words, there's no specific training for the people in the wastewater treatment. They simply receive training from those people above them. And invariably, that information is not sufficient to run the plants correctly. And as a result of that, we end up with effluent, raw effluent ending in rivers. The urban roadside dumping of solid waste. Again, by skills training, we can deal with solid waste. We can't stop solid waste. Solid waste is a function of populations, and we can't stop it. The issue is, what do we do with it? And again, developing technologies and applying skills training will solve this problem. It's solvable. Climate change. This is my country. This is what it looks like some of the time, much of the time. Climate change. This was once a land of milk and honey, and we are suffering droughts and fires. And this is because of climate change. So this issue is not something just India, it's all over the world, right here. And again, solved. We can't make more water in Australia. You can make more water in India by making the water that you have. Skills training will do that. Opportunities. Environmental skills education is vital throughout the world and represents a remarkable opportunity in India. There's so much employment opportunity in India. Almost anybody who gets their skills training, their degree, their diploma, ought to be able to find work in the environmental space. Certainly in the technology, energy, and environmental space. There is so much that needs to be done and so much work to do. This is really a matter of organisation. Economic benefits, availability of natural resources, sustainability of natural resources. Taxpayer funds are saved, and the budget allocation that's there increased from 26.8 billion rupees to 29 billion rupees. So this money that's budgeted for environment can much of that can be diverted to skills training in order to achieve those things that I've mentioned before. This is what happens when skills training is successful. Is that not a remarkable picture? So what's next? So our small part of this equation, the Australian Institute of Water Sciences in India, is now a fully functioning Indian company, a subsidiary of the Australian Institute of Water Sciences in Australia. is now a company in India. So skills training, remedial project work, research, providing international qualifications. But look at the top of the list. It's skills training. It's not just us who needs to take care of this. So many of the colleges, the schools and colleges need to look at not just offering degrees, not just the IITs, but specific skill training that deals with specific things in environmental that's needed. An indication, this is a lab there to give you an indication of that. This is what we mean by skills training. In other words, demonstrating, showing people how to collect data, showing them how to test, for instance, environmental testing. National opportunities in environment. So skills training happens all over India. And of course, as I said before, because India is such a young nation, so much youth, India is able to share that youth with other countries who are facing aging populations, who will not have the youth that they need to be able to do the kind of, to hold their economies together. Creating teams of qualified trainers and producing teams of skilled environmentalists. So in recent times, we've managed to secure some positions, some work where we've actually got some of this skills training done. A success story in Taloja where a treatment plant was absolutely not working, and simply for the very reason that I spoke about. So not only was the treatment plant not working, but very likely its life being shortened. So many millions of dollars in thousands of crore put towards CETPs all over the country, and instead of lasting 25 years, they only last 5 years, and they only last 5 years because of lack of skills training. In this occasion, these people over here are now fully trained and able to operate their CETP correctly. So that means environmental issues, not dumping waste directly into waterways and rivers, and also being able to save taxpayers' money. Problem solving for government and industry. Again, as I said, technology, as you increase skills training, as we add those things to education, we increase the possibility that new skills will be developed. Indians will come up with even new technology that they contribute to the world. All of this adding to Indian economy. In this particular case, we're looking at removal of micron-sized glass particles from glass manufacturing. This is a way of saving water. So how do we do this? Well, accredited skills training, for instance, in our case, and this can happen in IITs and universities, an intermediate certificate in water operations, a senior certificate in water operations. These are full qualifications, but there's also short courses. Short, specific courses that deal with specific things, like, for instance, how to collect a sample, how to test for a pH, how to test for various things. All of these things need to be done. They need to be done, and they need to be believable. This kind of training needs to be taken up in great numbers in order to achieve the kind of environmental success that I'm talking about. Research. So many of our graduates are going on to doing research degrees, and the environment in India produces a very rich source of research opportunities. So there's research for environmental prevention and remediation. So on one side of the coin, looking at how we prevent pollution and other environmental issues. And on the other side of the coin, looking at areas that have already been damaged, how do we remediate them? What sort of new technologies can we apply that will remediate them? All of this comes from the skills education. So apply skills education. Skills education leads to more opportunities in environment. More opportunities in environment leads to more research opportunities. This way, the colleges, institutes play a major part in the Indian economy, not just putting out graduates, but actually getting involved in the entire Indian economy. This, for instance, is a major success of CTP in Melbourne that I was involved in. This was a wastewater treatment plant producing clean water in which lives birds, marine life, water life. So there's birds, fish, frogs, crustaceans live in this environment now that was once a dumping place for wastewater. The case study, for instance, as I mentioned before, that we're now about to be involved in the Yamuna River. So again, what needs to be done? Baseline studies, the water chemistry, the wildlife interaction, wildlife migration needs to be looked at, freshwater species, favorable vegetation. All of these things can only be addressed by skills. We need skilled workers now. This is what these things needs, skilled workers now. Technology transfer, both ways, from India, from overseas. Again, environmental prevention and mediation. So technology in both remediation and in prevention. Okay, so in what areas would we consider technology transfer? Again, all of these things which need skills training in order to happen: potable water treatment, wastewater treatment, biofuel production, water harvesting, river systems remediation, lakes and dams remediation, noise reduction at workplaces, noxious gas scrubbing. We don't need to have cities that you wake up and you can barely see your hand in front of your face. We don't need that. We can actually alleviate that. CO2 capture to lessen the impact of climate change. And one of the major things that we have problems with in India, and that's solid waste sorting. Specialized batch flow, final settling, industrial wastewater. So again, new technologies, applying new technologies. That means that water that comes from this facility goes in that river over there and that water is as good or better than the water that's currently in the river. No amount of work that we do or skills training will ever work until this plant, a plant just like this, works so that there is no effluent being dumped into the river. Solid waste. Almost any major urban centers have hills and hills and hills of solid waste that need to be dealt with. It's all sitting on valuable land. They need to be dealt with, and they can be dealt with by, again, producing proper solid waste sorting facilities. New education in sorting needs to begin. Maharashtra did a fantastic thing just in the last couple of years, stopping plastic bags, and for that reason, you don't see them as much as you did once before that. But that's to go further. We need skills training over here. We need to battle. This is an important function. Can't be with like this is remedial labor, so therefore we won't give it much attention. It needs the attention. It needs proper skills training. Okay, as I bring this talk to a close, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who has some interest in this area and who'd like to contact me. The way that we can do this is to form partnerships That's not just us and you, but between Indian companies. We're now an Indian company ourselves, so Indian companies getting together, forming partnerships, especially with colleges and education institutes, to impart skill training, develop new skills, frameworks. Finally, I'm proud to tell you, probably one of the most beautiful sites in the world, this one. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Sir, you made us... Yes.
Few questions.
Sir, you made...
Thank you.
Sir, we'll move towards the question answer session, and then so the question from the student side, one of the student, he has the question, what factors do you think that Indian education lacks as compared to Australian education system?
We are from the higher education point of view, we're very similar. But what we do have over here is a high emphasis on skills training. We have the emphasis is to tell students that becoming a skilled person is as important as becoming a person with a higher education. In other words, we don't devalue skills. And one of the things that we do in schools is we make sure that students get a taste for other skills other than higher education, so that they can make valuable choices. Those people who want to end up in skills areas are encouraged to, and certainly remuneration. So pay is good for skilled people, just as it is for people with higher education.
Yes, sir. The next question from Dr. Ashok More. He wanted to ask that what is the comparison between environment impact assessment in India and environmental management plan in Australia?
Thank you for the question. As far as I can see, the issue is that without the proper skills education, collecting baseline data, for instance, is nearly impossible. Collecting data that you can trust, that you can believe in, and that you can act on is nearly impossible. So if we increase the skill level in India, and certainly not just the skill level, but also the number of skilled people, in order to do this massive work that's ahead of you, then the amount of that type of training needs to increase exponentially.
Yes, sir. Sir,
just a minute. He wanted to understand the comparison of this Indian situation and Australian situation.
Yeah, in Australia, that has already been addressed, and the government is very focused on providing skills training. So we have colleges of what we call tertiary and further education colleges all over our country, and these are specifically focused on skills training. So the difference is that there are per capita many more of these over here.
Okay, sir. And so one more question. Dr. Chaugule, sir, he wanted to know whether we can get some internship opportunities to graduating engineers in water sector to enhance their skills. Whether we have certain opportunities.
Yes. Well, I think, as I said in the speech, and that is that we need to open the doors to those opportunities. So opportunities like that, of course, exist overseas. However, we need to open the doors to these opportunities in India, and by getting a commitment at government level and at city level to address issues in the environment will necessarily open the doors to more to more employment in that area and more opportunities in that area. So the opportunities in India are huge. They just need to be opened up.
Okay. And sir, one more. I think this could be the last question.
Yeah.
Sir, Dr. Jain wanted to ask that how will you train the people or the students to conserve the drinking water?
I think that's an education that happens to be in the whole community, not just the students. But certainly, if we start with the students, like we do in Australia, water is so scarce in our country. We can have a drought that lasts for 10 years, with no rain at all. So you can imagine how scarce water is in our country. So just from primary school age, you're basically encouraged in how to save water. I think it's a broad educational need for the whole community. But then again, with the skills training, it means that the water that is available in India, like the Yamuna River, is able to be used successfully, and we can do that by making that river useful.
Thank you, sir. Sir, just a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for highlighting the need of skills education in India and highlighting how it happens in Australia in new paradigm. Professor Bell, you have made us think, being youngest nation, it's our responsibility to inculcate multidisciplinary, skilled environmentalists in our nation. Thank you for being with us this morning, sir. We are enlightened with your thoughts. Now may I request Vadai sir to share his views.
Am I seen video? My video is available here, ma'am?
Sir, I could not see you, but the audio is pretty clear. I could not see you, sir.
Is it okay? Okay, audio is there?
Yes, audio is clear.
Okay. So my comments, it is not a questions to Philip Bell. Thank you very much for updating about the youthful nation, about the need of skilling, reskilling and upskilling. I'm sure at DY Patil College of Engineering, we will take up this issue of the reskilling, upskilling issues and incorporate the your training and certification program at the DYPCOE level. I know that your project-based learning and problem-based learning and experiential learning happen when somebody does it practically. And right question which has been posed by Mr. Mukund Chaugale, that once the internship opportunity is given to those people, specifically we have a set of students, those who would like to go for the internship in civil engineering department. Your presentation is wonderful, and thank you very much for being with us from specifically sparing your valuable time for India. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure for everybody.
Thank you, Atul sir also. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.